In 1947, India faced an immense logistical challenge. The newly independent nation needed to provide for hundreds of millions of children scattered across diverse states, each with its own regional languages and administrative habits. To address this, the government formed an ad hoc task force in 1964. Led by University Grants Commission Chairman Dalit Singh Kothari, the Kothari Commission was mandated to overhaul the entire Indian education sector. Their most lasting contribution was a universal structural framework. They proposed a nationwide standard of 10 years of foundational schooling, 2 years of higher secondary, and 3 years of university education, the 10+2+3 system. Alongside this structure, the Commission recommended that the state provide free and compulsory education for every child between the ages of 6 and 14. These ideas were formalized in the National Policy on Education in 1968. It enacted the Common School System, a policy designed to equalize resources so that rural students would have the same educational opportunities as those in urban centers. The country now had a standardized blueprint for learning. But because it was designed for a specific type of learner, the system inadvertently locked millions of children out. Specifically, census data revealed roughly 10 million disabled children were entirely unaccounted for in this new framework. The government's first major pivot came in 1974 with the Integrated Education for Disabled Children scheme. Rather than isolating students with disabilities, the IEDC aimed to bring them into common schools by providing allowances for books, uniforms, and specialized equipment. But adding a side door to an existing structure rarely fixes the foundation. True inclusion would require a legislative overhaul of the entire national system. By the 1980s, the 10+2+3 structure had been adopted across the country. Yet, in many regions, actual retention and access were struggling. To address this, the 1986 National Policy on Education rolled out physical upgrades. A key initiative was Operation Blackboard, which mandated that every primary school must have at least 2 functional classrooms, basic teaching supplies, and 2 teachers. The policy also established Navodaya schools. These were free residential institutions designed to capture and nurture talented children living in rural, disadvantaged areas. This comparison table shows how the 1992 modifications expanded on these policies. Notice the right column. The focus shifts from aiming for access to emphasizing universal elementary education as a fundamental right. The physical capacity of the education system was widening. But a common wave of 1990s legislation would move the country beyond voluntary inclusion towards strict legal mandates. During the 1990s, the government began standardizing special education through a series of specific laws. First was the Rehabilitation Council of India Act of 1992. This established an apex body to regulate how special educators were trained, ensuring baseline professional standards across the country. Then came the Persons with Disabilities Act of 1995. This guaranteed free education in integrated environments up to age 18 and required educational institutes receiving government grants to reserve 3% of their seats for people with disabilities. 4 years later, the National Trust Act of 1999 filled a critical gap. It focused explicitly on individuals with autism, cerebral palsy, mental retardation, and multiple disabilities, conditions the 1995 Act struggled to cover. It applied these protections through actionable schemes, like DISHA for early intervention therapies, and VCAS to provide daycare and skill enhancement for older individuals. By the turn of the millennium, the parallel tracks of general national schooling and specialized disability support were fully operational, leading to a period of total legal fusion. In the 2000s, the government moved from merely building infrastructure to legally guaranteeing a citizen's right to access it. This started with the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, launched in 2000. It was an administrative push to achieve universal elementary education while bridging gender and social gaps. This momentum led to the Right to Education Act of 2009. The RTE established a core legal mechanism. It officially elevated free and compulsory education for children aged 6 to 14 into a fundamental constitutional right. It also required private schools to reserve 25% of their admissions for economically disadvantaged groups. Education was now an enforceable human right that citizens could defend in a court of law. But while the right to learn was secured, the definitions of who needed support were lagging. The old 1995 definitions of disability were functionally outdated. The 2016 Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act expanded legal recognition from 7 categories to 21 conditions, including specific learning and chronic neurological disabilities. It mandated that all educational institutions provide barrier-free physical accessibility and individualized support to maximize development. This timeline culminates with the National Education Policy of 2020. It allows disabled children to choose between regular schooling, resource centers, or supported homeschooling, depending on their individual requirements. Over 60 years, India's educational framework transformed from a fragmented 1960s blueprint into a legally binding promise, ensuring that the system adapts to the student and no child is left behind.